Hey friends, welcome to Crafty Thursday. Jennie and I are back. I got my painting smock on, and Jennie's wearing her traditional painting sweater because it's cold in the studio. And today we're going to pick up with some more mini painting. This Coke Zero Break brought to you by DoD Spec Ops, Tricky Troy, and Ann Adams. You too can join us on Patreon for as low as $1 to have exclusive access to exclusive content. There's nothing better than a good brush, Jennie.
Yep.
And this brush came from Gen Con.
That's neat.
So how are we doing with Captain Aki?
Okay, so Captain Aki right now, he has almost all of his...
Bring him a little lower so he's...
Here.
Yeah.
So he has almost all of his flat coats on. His
Yes.
cape's like essentially done.
Mm-hmm.
So all I need to do is I need to fill in like the arms, and some of the facial stuff still needs its flat coat, and then I get to have fun with detailing.
Yes. And I am working on Trizzle still because I am slow and I screw up things. So Trizzle has 2 coats now on his primary colors, like his blue undershirt, his red jacket, his skin, his purple skin. I feel like I might have to lighten up that purple skin. There's a shot from the back. But I am going to go with starting off going deep. So he has this muddy brown in his pants, and his boots are blue, or his boots are brown, and his gloves are brown. But what I want to do is hit those again with the Army Painter War Paints leather brown. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit of that, tiny bit of this leather brown, because I want to kind of even that out. And I'm actually going to wet my brush with this and then blot off a bunch of it. So it's almost going to be like a highlight coat. And I'm literally just going to hit the parts that face the light. So it's not quite dry brush. And I'm going to do the same thing there. Got to fill my brush with this paint and then blot some of it off. Then I'm just going to kind of do that over his gauntlet, his leather gloves, where I hit it with red on accident because I'm sloppy. So remember how we were talking about techniques for developing a steady hand, Jennie?
Yes.
I'm using the table to steady my hand. And I'm breathing. One of my friends was a sniper in a branch of the military that will not be named. And he told me that when he fires off a round, he takes a deep breath in and then he slowly exhales. And he fires the round on the exhale. That helps smooth his nerves out. What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know if mini painting is the same level of expertise, but I would agree that it is always good to have us, like, remembering to breathe and breathe deeply.
And by the way, just to make that clear, that's totally not true. I learned that from watching movies about snipers. Maybe it's true, I don't know. But I don't really have a friend who was a sniper. So I am cleaning up the areas where I hit red on the gauntlet because I'm a dummy. And I think that I don't want to overdo it. I want the gauntlet to be clearly brown leather, but I don't want it to be sloppy and blobbish. So I'm just trying to get into those spots where I accidentally hit the red. How are you dealing with getting those little detailed parts like underneath his armor and between the armor? Do you find that challenging? Or?
It is pretty difficult, especially like when you're doing caped things. It's always hard to like get that little spot in between their back and the cape. But I also find sometimes that's always a good thing, because if you sit there trying to do it so specifically, sometimes you'll just never get it. So it's always good to kind of go back. That's a nice like, oh, final touch thing to go back and really like finish up those spots.
Yeah.
What are we doing now? Oh yeah, he needs like shirts. See, this is always the part that I have like the hardest time with, is like what colors the actual like flat clothes should be under armor. Where I'm thinking I'm probably gonna do like some spots are like the dark blue and some spots are black, because I just imagine like canonically what would make sense.
I feel that. I will have to go over this with some other kind of highlight to differentiate from his brown pants and his brown boots. But I think the most important parts for the brown is would definitely be the boots and the gauntlets, his leather gloves. Okay, so not to waste any of that, I'm going to let Trizzy dry for a minute. Now here we have some minis that I picked up, and they're like rock elementals. So you can see that on the cutaway, Dave. They're some rock elementals. So what I'm probably going to do is base them in kind of a mashup of browns and blacks, and then highlight in gray. So I'm going to use this extra brown that I have and just start doing that. Just start filling in some of the spots, you know. Use it up. Use up some of that brown. And I think with something like an elemental, a rock elemental, it's totally fine to have, you know, inconsistency, because rocks aren't perfectly consistent anyway. So I'm going to kind of use up some brown, and then I'll come back later and hit it with some black and some gray. And it looks like there's almost crystals jutting out from this guy too, so maybe that'll give me an opportunity to get some color in there. Can experiment with that. And also a lot of deep textures between these rocks, you know, between his kind of rocky carapace, where I can get some wash in there too.
Another great thing to keep in mind when you're coloring characters, especially like player characters or NPCs, is like what specific tones really associate with it. Because there are some people just like when they make their player, they're like, oh, well, this is a color I like. But if you're really designing them and you want your world to be as realistic and natural as possible, you have to think based on a lot of things. One is often, you know, gods. If you're making something like a paladin, a cleric, they would almost certainly have some of the color that their god is represented by on their thing, if not the holy symbol.
Yeah. Extremely valid point.
And even if you don't have a specific god, other classes, you know, druids most often, since they won't have a lot of metal on them, you have to make sure you're working with different shades of brown and green to get those kind of things. And, you know, it would make sense for a druid to not have a lot of flashy colors necessarily, because they're very naturalistic.
Yeah.
And background to, like, finances, if there's certain colors, because in medieval times, there are certain colors that are like, the dyes are just harder to obtain. So somebody wearing like a solid purple cloak probably isn't like a normal class person. So you really have to think about, okay, like what class are they in? Would they be able to afford this? You know, just nice things to keep in mind to really make your world feel real.
So as I'm doing this guy, I'm basing him in a much thicker matte black. And I'm actually just splodging right over the brown that I originally used. It'll all come out later. But I really want to get this black into all the nooks and crannies on this guy, with the exception of the apparent crystals at the bottom. I'm going to avoid leaking into those because I want to paint those with a bit of color. So I'm just doing kind of all the base layers on this dude in this rich, thick, slightly watered down black to base him up. Getting in the nooks and crannies.
Sometimes it can be a little intimidating to look at a figure with so many spots and really try to like perfect every spot of it and, you know, catch every crevice and corner and, you know, right color. So what I have also seen some people do, and what I like to do if I have time, is wait a day to final coat it. So that before you put on that, you know, final matte seal or shiny seal, you get another chance to look at it, you know, 24 hours, it's dried, and you can take another like fresh look at it and really see, oh, well, would I want to change that? Does that look right?
Right. Well, and that not only does it give a chance for the paint to literally dry and the colors to set, because I think a big thing that I sometimes see people not get is that colors as they're painted on wet are not necessarily going to be the same as how they dry, which is hugely important to know. Enormously important. Very, very crucially important to know. So with this here guy, I am dipping in as much of this black paint to base him as possible. And then if I want these crystals to really pop later, I'll probably have to go over them with white. But I'm going to get his base done. And then I'm going to try to not paint the crystals that I know I want to be a vibrant color. I'll have to touch them up, of course, with some white before I hit them with color. But so what looks very glossy right now should dry in a matte finish because this is a matte black. And it's messy, for sure, because I watered it down quite a bit. But I'm just poking, and I switched brushes too, by the way. I'm using a crappy crafting brush because I don't want to paint this big mini with my nice brush because I'm literally smashing the bristles in to get all these different nooks and crannies. Nooks and crannies. Crafting with Jennie and Bill. Welcome to Nooks and Crannies, everybody. Today we're going to paint some nooks and some crannies.
Those parts are literally what sets like a lot of like great minis from mediocre. Because when you get ones done at the store where they're just like dip colored and then they throw on a quick spray and that's it, then you're never going to get that same level of detail.
Yeah, for sure. So by watering down this brush, I'm actually diluting some of this black. But I kind of need to do it to get in all these interesting little places. So that's fine. It'll all work out. All right, it's like a lava elemental now. And while I have this big dumb brush, I might as well do it on this guy because that's like his twin. Needs more paint though. I'm going to blob in some monster brown. That's a lot of paint. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. This way my rock guys won't look exactly the same. And maybe that'll work out, and maybe it won't. Maybe I'll be mad and I'll regret that I did this. But I figured, why have two elementals that look exactly the same? So for this one, I'm basing him in more of a brown. And I'm getting sloppy because it doesn't matter, because I'm going to go back over this with a lot of different colors. I don't think any rocks are exactly perfectly one color, right? Most rocks are a mix of browns and grays, and maybe you sometimes get some glints of other minerals in there.
That does bring up a good point about the monster miniatures. Is often, especially when you buy them, they will all just kind of be the same. But even if you have a lot of the same thing, it really helps a player's immersion when they have like defining features, or even if all your minis do look similar. If they have different like color patterns, or this one is slightly darker than this one, it's a small detail that can make a big difference for players.
Absolutely.
And then instead of referencing them as like, oh, well, I'll get the one on the left, the one on the right, then they're like, oh, well, I'll get this larger looking one, or this one with like the red cape, or
Yeah, well, it can make, identical characters a little bit more individualized. You can help your minis to stand out a little bit more.
Now, I have to ask, do you have Fanoop minis?
Nope.
Oh my god.
I don't. Not custom, at least. I've been using some of the other like Nobleman minis that I've gotten from different collections. So how's he coming along?
He is going pretty well. Like, I've started to kind of also understand what you mean, where like certain parts you do sort of want to rush along, because right now I'm going into like a lot of the small crevices, like the shirt around his wrist and like the back of his pants under the shoulder pads, and it's it's a part where it's the last thing and I really do want to finish it, and I want to get things like done so it's easy to rush. But also the quicker that I do this, if I start to just smear paint on there, then I have to go back anyway, and it's gonna actually take me longer.
So by contrast, I'm smearing paint all over this guy because he's an elemental. He's rocks. He's made of rocks. So I'm just literally, while the brown is still wet, I'm mashing in black, matte black over this. Because this is the kind of mini that is almost like terrain, and it will come together in the next few layers of highlights and washes and stuff like that. So I'm just going over him sloppy style.
And the next few episodes.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, and in the next few episodes, we will see quite a variety, quite a difference, in fact. So what I'm doing is just mashing up and using up the rest of this brown and black. And then we're going to let them sit. And then I'll have two very different looking, probably very different looking, elementals. I want to use up the rest of this black, especially down in any dark crevice and kind of corner area where the light naturally wouldn't be hitting as much. I want to make sure that I fill in my darks there. And if I miss anything, it's not a big deal. I could always come back and hit that with a wash to fill in anything. But now it's a very muddy black kind of look. So two elementals drying, and one much darker than the other, but that's okay. Gonna let them dry. Gonna let Trizzle dry. Gonna let Eddie dry. And Jennie, that's coming along. Why don't you show the camera one more time? Yeah, looking
Down a little further.
down a little further. Looking good. Here, I'll move the palette out of the way. Down a little further. Looking good. looking good. All right, time to rinse our brushes. Take another break to let things dry. So we'll come back. We'll see you on the next time on Crafty Thursday.
Okay, are you ready now?
Yes. I was ready before.
Okay.
It's your fault.
Okay, go ahead.